Story 1. I was 19 when it happened, living in a crappy student apartment off Northwest 23rd in Oklahoma City. I wasn't into parties or anything, but I liked going on late drives with friends, and that's how we ended up outside the old Griffin Memorial Hospital ruins in Norman. I don't even remember who said it first. Someone just blurted out, "Let's check it out." And it was stupid, but you know how it is when you're 19. There was 5 of us, all jammed in David's old Corolla, the heat barely working. We didn't talk much on the drive, just played the radio too loud and tried not to think about finals. We parked behind this rusted-out fence, the kind with the no trespassing sign hanging sideways, and you could see the whole shell of the building in the moonlight. All the windows were broken out, glass littering the weeds. It smelled like rain and mildew, even outside. I wasn't even going to go in. I stood there looking at that black hole of a window, thinking about how bad an idea it was, but then I heard Tanner laughing behind me saying, "Come on, don't be lame." I climbed through last, and the air inside hit me hard, cold and stale, like something had been trapped in there for years. We had those cheap dollar store flashlights, and they barely lit up the graffiti and holes punched in the walls. It was dead quiet, except for the glass crunching under our shoes, and I swear it felt like the whole building was holding its breath. We found what used to be the lobby, and there were these half-burned papers scattered everywhere, old patient files, the words smeared and torn, and a rusted gurney flipped on its side. Tanner said something about wanting to find the morgue, and I told him to shut up, but he just laughed. That laugh echoed weird in there, bouncing down the hall. I don't even know how long we wandered around, but it felt like we were going in circles, past old doors with broken windows and graffiti that said stupid things like, "Help me," and 666. It was cliché, but it still made me uneasy. We found the stairwell eventually, and David wanted to go down, but I just froze at the top. It was pitch black, and I couldn't see the bottom, but it smelled like wet concrete and rust. The others started down, and I stayed there shining my flashlight into the darkness, and I said, "I'll wait here." I didn't even know why I said it, but the air felt heavy, and something in me just couldn't take another step. That's when I heard it. At first I thought it was just the wind, but it was too clear. It was humming, a woman's voice, low and soft, coming from somewhere in the dark below. It was an old song, the kind you'd hear in a lullaby, but off, like she was humming through her teeth. I called out, "Guys, do you hear that?" But no one answered. The humming just kept going, getting a little louder, like whoever it was moving up the stairs. I could hear my own breathing, fast and shaky, and the humming didn't stop, just kept coming closer. I backed up, shining my flashlight down, but the beam just hit dust in the air, and there was nothing there. But the humming was right there, like it was just around the corner. I said, "Tanner, stop messing around." But it wasn't him. I knew it wasn't him. The flashlight started flickering, and I smacked it against my palm, and that's when the humming stopped, just cut off in the middle of a note. The silence that hit was worse than the humming. It was like the building was listening, waiting. Then I heard a footstep, slow, deliberate, on the stairs, just one step up. I didn't wait. I turned and ran, calling for the others. My voice was echoing, and I couldn't even hear if they were answering. I ran past rooms with doors hanging off the hinges, past graffiti that looked like faces in the light, and I just kept running until I hit the room where we came in. I yelled, "We need to go now!" And the others were there, pale, eyes wide, asking what happened. I didn't answer. I just climbed out the window, cutting my hand on the glass, and I didn't care. The others followed, and we ran back to the car, breathless, the cold air burning my lungs. We didn't say anything, just slammed the doors and peeled out, gravel popping under the tires. No one talked on the drive back. We didn't even turn on the radio. When we dropped everyone off, Tanner tried to laugh it off, saying, "Dude, it was probably a junkie," but his voice was thin, and he didn't look me in the eye. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to tell myself it was nothing, just the wind or an echo, but I couldn't shake it. The humming, the way it stopped, the footstep, none of it felt human. I never went back there. I never will. Story 2. I never really told this to anyone except my brother, and I'm only writing it now because it's been eating at me. I'm Sam. I live outside of Dayton, Ohio, and back when I was 20, I spent most weekends driving around with friends, looking for abandoned places to photograph. We weren't trying to be ghost hunters or whatever. We just liked the adrenaline of sneaking in and the weird feeling of empty places. One Saturday, we found an old steel factory about 40 minutes from my place. It had been shut down since the early 90s, and it was half swallowed by vines, graffiti everywhere, busted windows. I went with my buddy Eli, and we got there around 4 in the afternoon. The place was surrounded by a rusted chain-link fence, but someone had already cut it open near the back, so we slipped in, stepping over broken glass and dead leaves. Inside, it was exactly how you'd expect. Huge empty floors, puddles of water, old cables hanging from the ceiling. We split up to get better shots. Eli went toward what looked like an old locker area, while I walked down a hallway with flickering light leaking through the broken windows. I wasn't scared, not yet, just alert, listening for footsteps or the clatter of falling metal. I found this hallway that was lined with old office doors, most of them missing, the room stripped bare. One door was still mostly on its hinges, and someone had spray-painted "Control" on it in red letters. It looked like it led to a small control room with a panel of rusted buttons and switches under a cracked window overlooking the factory floor. I stood there trying to get a shot of the panel when I heard a deep groan, like metal shifting somewhere above. I didn't think much of it. Old buildings do that. I kept my camera up trying to frame the photo when I heard a loud, sharp crack and then a thunderous crash somewhere deeper in the building. My first thought was Eli. I thought the floor or a staircase collapsed under him. I ran out of that control room so fast I didn't even realize I dropped my flashlight. The crash had stirred up so much dust that it was floating in the light coming through the broken windows, and every breath tasted like rust. I started shouting Eli's name, my voice echoing in the empty steel corridors. I found him standing at the far end of the hallway looking pale, but he was okay. I remember feeling this huge wave of relief, like my knees almost gave out. I asked him if he was hurt, and he shook his head. He said, "Dude, you need to see this." He turned around and I followed him around the corner, down another hall with peeling paint and water dripping from pipes. We came to a place where the ceiling had partially caved in, blocking a stairway with chunks of concrete and twisted rebar. But that's not what made us stop. There, propped up against the far wall, was what I thought was a mannequin. It was wearing a filthy blue coverall, the kind factory workers used to wear, and its head was tilted to the side like its neck was broken. One arm was out, fingers curled stiffly, like it was reaching for something. At first, I laughed. "Someone dragged a dummy in here to mess with people," I said. But then I noticed its boots. They were real boots, scuffed and cracked, caked with dried mud. And there was something about the way it was slumped, its shoulders pulled in tight, that made my skin crawl. Eli didn't say a word, just stood there breathing hard, his eyes locked on it. I stepped closer because I needed to prove to myself it was fake. I got about 6 feet away when I realized I could see hair. Thin, gray strands sticking out from under a battered hard hat, moving slightly in the breeze. That's when the smell hit me, like copper and rot, so sharp I gagged. And then its head moved. Not a big movement, just a slow turn toward me, like it was struggling or like its neck was stiff. I heard the scrape of its boots on the floor as one foot shifted. Its hand twitched. I swear to God, I saw its fingers open and close, like it was trying to grab the air. I backed up so fast I almost slipped on the wet floor. Eli was whispering, "Sam, Sam, Sam," over and over. I grabbed his arm and we just ran. I didn't look back, not once, but I could hear something behind us. A dragging sound, like a heavy boot scraping on concrete, following us as we ran back through the hallways. We didn't stop until we were out of the building, crawling back through the fence, tearing our clothes on the rusted wires. We got to the car, and I was shaking so bad I could barely get the key in the ignition. We drove in silence until we hit the main road, both of us breathing like we'd been underwater. Neither of us went back to that factory. I don't know what we saw. Maybe it was a squatter, dying or already dead, stuck in that building for who knows how long. Maybe it was something else, something that wears the shape of a man in old coveralls, waiting in dead places like that for people stupid enough to go looking for it. Eli doesn't like to talk about it, and honestly, I don't either. I still have the photos from that day, but I've never looked at them closely. Story 3. I don't usually tell people about this because it sounds made up, but I live near Limerick, and there's this forest up on the mountain that's always felt off. Not haunted, just wrong, you know? I do photography part-time, mostly abandoned places, so I've been around sketchy areas before. But this one was different. It was in March, damp cold, that kind of cold that gets in your bones even if you're layered up. I just borrowed my cousin's old Nikon, and I wanted to get some moody shots for a project. I knew there was an abandoned hospital somewhere in those woods, and I figured if I got there early, I'd have enough daylight to poke around without getting lost. My mom wasn't thrilled about it when I told her. "Don't be stupid, Dara. That place is bad news." She's not superstitious, but she grew up hearing stories about that hospital. Kids going missing, a patient found dead in the woods, weird stuff like that. I shrugged it off. I'd been in enough abandoned places to know that the scariest thing is usually a raccoon or a junkie trying to steal copper pipes. The walk-up was quiet, no birds, just the sound of mud sucking at my boots. I stopped once to take a photo of an old stone wall covered in moss, the kind that looks like it's swallowing the rocks. That's when I first noticed I couldn't hear the wind anymore. No rustling branches, nothing. Just this heavy quiet, like the air was holding its breath. I was about 30 minutes from where I parked when I found it. It was a clearing, and right in the middle was a burned-out car. The windows were gone, and the metal was rusted and blackened, the smell of old ash still clinging around it. That wasn't the weird part, though. The weird part was the camp nearby. Someone had been there, but it looked like they'd left in a hurry. There was a tarp half buried in leaves, a plastic water bottle with moss growing inside, and a huge bolt cutter, the handle half melted like someone had tried to burn it. I took a couple of photos, thinking it would make for a good urban decay series, but I couldn't shake this feeling that I wasn't alone. You know how your body just knows? The hairs on my arms stood up, and I kept looking over my shoulder, but there was nothing, just empty forest. About 50 meters past the car, I found them. A pair of jeans, women's, dark blue, crumpled in the mud. I remember thinking, please don't let there be blood. There wasn't. I almost left right then, but I told myself it was probably some party spot, and someone just left them there. But then, a few steps ahead, I saw them hanging on a low branch. A pair of pink panties swaying slightly even though there was no wind. They were damp and stained with mud, but it was obvious they'd been there for a while. My stomach dropped, and I actually said out loud, "Nah, man, nope." But I still took a photo, my hands shaking so bad the focus was all over the place. I don't know why I took that photo, maybe to convince myself later it was real. I turned around to leave, trying to keep calm, but the forest felt tighter somehow, like it was leaning in on me. That's when I heard it, footsteps behind me, crunching leaves, slow and deliberate. I spun around, but there was nothing there. The footsteps stopped when I stopped. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking. "I'm just taking pictures. I'm leaving now." Nothing. I started walking faster, eyes darting everywhere, clutching the camera like it was going to protect me. Then I heard it again, closer. The sound of someone moving, just out of sight, pacing me. I broke into a jog, not caring if I slipped in the mud, just wanting to get out of there. That's when I smelled it. Rot, like something dead but worse, mixed with wet earth and something chemical. It was so strong it made me gag, and I stumbled, nearly dropping the camera. Then I heard breathing, right behind me. Heavy, raspy, wet breathing, like someone with a bad lung infection. I turned and there was nothing, just empty woods, but the breathing didn't stop. It was right there in front of me, but invisible. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, listening to that breathing. Then it moved. Whatever it was, it stepped toward me, and I felt it brush past me, cold, like walking through a freezer door. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it, and I could smell it, that rotting stench making my eyes water. I ran. I don't even remember deciding to run. I was just sprinting, branches whipping my face, mud flying up my legs, slipping and sliding, and that breathing, it followed me the whole way, sometimes behind me, sometimes to the side, sometimes so close I felt it on my neck. I didn't stop until I saw the break in the trees where I'd parked. I fell against my car, trying to catch my breath, looking back into the tree line. It was silent again. The air felt normal, like the forest had gone back to pretending it was just a forest. I got in the car, shaking so bad I almost dropped the keys. As I pulled away, I looked in the rearview mirror. I don't know why, I just did. And I swear to God, standing there at the edge of the trees was a figure, pale, thin, just standing there watching me leave. When I got home, I took the SD card out of the camera and put it in my laptop. The photo of the panties was there, blurry, but you could see them. But in the corner, near the tree, there was something else, a shape, a pale face, eyes too big, mouth open, black inside like a hole. I shut the laptop and haven't looked at that photo since. I checked the local news for days after, looking for reports of a missing person or anything about that hospital, but there was nothing, just silence. I don't go up that mountain anymore. Story 4. I've been trying to forget that day for years now, but sometimes it comes back when I'm alone editing photos at night. My name's Marcus. I live in Montana, and I've been into landscape photography ever since I left the mining job that was killing my back. I like the quiet, the empty roads, the smell of sagebrush when the sun is high. I thought I'd seen most of what was out there, you know? Barns caving in, rusted out trucks with trees growing through them, abandoned sheds with moldy mattresses. But what I saw out near Choteau in 2019 was different. That morning, I loaded up the Subaru and headed out alone. My girlfriend was working a double at the diner, and I wanted to get some winter shots before the snow started to melt. I drove for a couple of hours on back roads until I saw this little dirt lane barely cut through a field of dry grass. It felt like one of those places that hadn't seen a vehicle in decades. I took it, just for the hell of it. I found the house tucked behind a windbreak of dead cottonwoods. 2 stories, steep roof, gray boards falling away. Nothing strange there. I pulled over, grabbed my camera and walked up the dirt path, snow crunching under my boots. I was going to take a few shots of the exterior. Good contrast with the sky, I thought. But as I walked around the side, I saw a window that still had glass in it, which was rare. I don't know why I looked in. Maybe it's habit, hoping for a good interior collapse shot. But when I did, my stomach went tight. It wasn't empty. It wasn't ruined like it should have been. It was like a perfect snapshot of 1950. There was a piano against the wall with yellow sheet music still open. A roll-top desk sat under the window, open, with papers stacked in perfect piles. There were family photos on the walls, black and white, everyone smiling in church clothes. A red-topped kitchen table with 4 matching chairs sat in the corner, and one of the chairs was pulled out like someone had just stood up. There were jackets hanging on a coat rack, dusty, but there. Fishing poles leaned in the corner. Magazines Life, Look, dated from 1950, were stacked on the coffee table. Firewood was piled next to the wood stove. It wasn't the objects themselves that got me. It was the dust. Everything was covered in a thick, gray blanket of it, inches thick, like time had dumped itself over that room and left it untouched. I took a few pictures through the glass, but they came out weird, blurry, even though my hands were steady. I couldn't explain it. I decided I needed a better angle, so I tried the front door, expecting it to be locked. It wasn't. The door opened with a long creak that echoed in the dead air. The smell was heavy, dust and something old, something sweet, like rotting wood and dried flowers. My boots left prints in the dust as I stepped inside. Every step felt wrong, like I was crossing a line I shouldn't. "Hello?" I said, even though I don't know why. I walked over to the coffee table, saw the magazines up close. The date on the top one was March 1950. There was a teacup on a saucer sitting there like someone had left it mid-sip. The tea long gone, the cup crusted with brown residue. The family photos looked down at me from the walls, all those eyes frozen in time. I moved to the piano, saw the music open to Moonlight Serenade. My camera beeped as I took another photo, and the beep felt too loud in that space. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, heavy, like I was breathing in the dust itself. I don't know how long I stood there before I noticed it. A noise, just a small sound, but in that silence, it was everything. It was coming from upstairs like a creak, then a thump, like someone shifting their weight on the floor. I froze. My brain was trying to catch up, telling me it was an animal, maybe a raccoon, a bird that got in through a broken window upstairs. But it didn't sound like that. It sounded deliberate, like footsteps, one step, then another, then silence. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer, just that silence that made the ringing in my ears deafening. I should have left. I know that now. But something pulled me forward, like I needed to know. I stepped toward the staircase, each step loud in the quiet. The dust was undisturbed on the stairs, thick except for halfway up, where there were prints. Bare footprints the size of a child's, pressed into the dust. I stopped breathing. I looked up, and for a split second, I saw something at the top of the stairs. It was a kid, or the shape of one, standing there, pale, eyes dark, clothes old-fashioned, like a little boy in suspenders. He didn't move. He just looked at me. I blinked and he was gone. Just gone. That was it. I turned and ran. I didn't care about the shots, didn't care about the camera swinging on its strap, didn't care about the dust cloud I kicked up. I got outside, slammed the door behind me, ran to the car, and drove until I was back on the highway with cell service again. I tried to show the photos to a friend later, but they were all ruined. Every shot inside that house was washed out, streaked with gray smears, as if the lens had been fogged up. But it wasn't. The outside shots were fine, just the ones inside. I've tried to look up that house since, tried to find out who lived there, why it was left like that, but I can't find anything. No one I've talked to knows about it. When I drove out there again months later, just to prove to myself it was real, I couldn't find the dirt road. I spent hours driving up and down that stretch, looking for the break in the grass, for the windbreak, for anything, but it was like it had never been there. I don't go looking for abandoned houses anymore. I don't go down dirt roads alone. Story 5. I don't really tell people this story anymore because it sounds dumb when I say it out loud, but it happened, and I think about it every time I see a dark parking structure. I used to live in Akron, Ohio, in this old brick duplex near the industrial strip where they'd shut down most of the factories. One Saturday in January around 5 in the evening, I decided to go check out this abandoned mall down the street. I wasn't planning to steal copper pipes or anything. I just wanted to kill time and see if it was as creepy as people said. It had been snowing the night before, so everything was gray and quiet. That kind of cold that makes your jaw hurt. I hopped the fence around the back, slipped through this broken service door, and ended up in what used to be the loading docks. Empty boxes, broken glass, old soda cans. It smelled like wet cement. I had a flashlight with me, and I wasn't even trying to be quiet. I kept saying out loud, just looking around, like an idiot, because I didn't want to get stabbed by some dude living back there. I found the ramp to the underground parking. It was wide and the slope was slick with ice. I slipped a little on the way down, and my stomach dropped when the darkness opened up in front of me. It was bigger down there than I expected, like a dark stadium full of pillars and empty air. My flashlight wasn't that strong, but it was enough to catch the glint of broken mirrors, bits of ice puddles, spray paint on the pillars. I started talking again. "Hey, I'm just checking the place out, okay?" I said it in a friendly voice, and my words bounced off the concrete and came back weird. I kept walking, shining the light left to right. It felt like something was moving every time the beam shifted, but it was just the shadows stretching out like long arms between the pillars. The deeper I went, the more I realized how far I was from the exit. My boots made these hard claps on the ground, and every time I paused, the silence felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me. Then I heard something. I froze. It was a scraping sound, like something shifting across the ground. I whipped the flashlight around, but there was nothing. I called out again, "Yo, if you're down here, I'm leaving, okay?" Nothing. I turned around and started walking back toward the ramp, trying to keep calm, but my heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I walked faster, and the beam of the flashlight bounced, making the shadows jerk and slide on the concrete. I hated how small the light felt down there. When I got near the base of the ramp, I saw it. There were footprints, not old dusty ones, fresh, wet prints in the dirt and snowmelt, leading away from the direction I'd just come from, curving around the pillar closest to the ramp. They were bare footprints, the toes clear, the arches deep, and they were pointed right at me. I stopped breathing. I felt this cold flush over me, not like fear, but like my body forgot how to move. My flashlight shook in my hand, and I forced it to follow the prints, back the way they had come, but they just vanished in the shadows between the pillars. I tried to listen for breathing, for anything, but it was dead silent. Then something moved. It was like a shape pulling back into the darkness behind one of the pillars, maybe 15 feet from me. I didn't see a face, or arms, or anything clear. It was just a shift, like a shadow pulling itself back. But it wasn't a shadow because shadows don't make noise. And I heard that scraping sound again, softer this time, like something dragging on concrete. I don't know why, but I said, "Hello?" My voice cracked when I said it. Nothing. And then, like it was answering me, there was this long exhale, deep, rough, like when you let out your breath in the cold. But I didn't see any breath cloud in the air. It was just the sound. It came from the pillar, low, and I swear it sounded like it was right there, 5 feet away, behind that concrete. That was it for me. I turned and ran, my boots sliding on the ice, my breath tearing out of my throat so loud I couldn't hear if anything was following me. I didn't look back. I ran up that ramp into the faint blue light coming through the broken doors above, and I didn't stop until I was outside, leaning on the cold fence, trying to keep my legs from collapsing. When I looked back at the entrance, I didn't see anyone. No movement, no footsteps following, nothing. The air was still, the snow crunching under my boots as I backed away. I don't know what I saw. I keep telling myself it was just some guy hiding, maybe waiting for me to leave so he could go back to whatever spot he sleeps in. But the footprints were bare, and it was below freezing, and there was no reason for someone to be down there with no shoes. Story 6. I don't tell many people about this night, mostly because I don't even know how to explain it without sounding like I'm making it up. I'm Josh. I've lived in Cleveland my whole life, and back in 2019, I was 23 and working overnights at a loading dock near the river. My friends and I would hang out after work since we were all on that flipped schedule, and one night we decided to go check out the old Hawthorne Asylum on the east side, the one that's been closed off for decades. It's not like we planned to ghost hunt or anything. We were just bored, and Tyler said he knew how to get in through the side fence, and it was either that or drive around drinking cheap coffee until sunrise. We pulled up around midnight. The place was massive, rotting brick and busted windows, with keep out signs everywhere. But that didn't stop us. We hopped the fence, and it was dead quiet except for the trees creaking. The first floor was a mess of graffiti and broken furniture. It was dark, but we had our phones out, and we were laughing, trying to scare each other, stepping around old hospital beds and weird paperwork scattered on the floor. We found the stairwell down to the basement after about 30 minutes, and I wish we hadn't. Tyler pushed open the rusted door, and the first thing I remember is how warm it was down there, like a heater was on, which made no sense in that cold building. The basement was huge, but what was even stranger was the tunnels that ran off from the main hall. They were maybe 5 meters wide, with arched ceilings, and they were lit. I mean, actual fluorescent lights buzzing above us, stretching down in both directions. I remember asking, who the hell is paying the electric bill for this place? And none of us had an answer. We took the tunnel to the right first, walking single file, trying to be quiet now because it felt wrong to be down there. After maybe 5 minutes, we came across this massive generator just humming in the dark, lights blinking on it. It was the only sound in that tunnel, that low mechanical hum. "Dude, let's get out of here," my buddy Ray whispered. But Tyler wanted to see the other tunnel before we left. I didn't want to be the only one to back out, so I followed. We turned around and started down the other tunnel, and it felt longer somehow, like it just kept going. We didn't talk, and I could feel sweat sticking my shirt to my back even though I was cold. We were almost to where the tunnel split in another direction when I saw them. At first, I thought it was a reflection on my phone screen, but then Ray whispered, "Who the fuck is that?" And I looked up. 2 men were walking toward us from the far end of the tunnel. They were in full green scrubs like hospital staff, with green surgical caps and face masks. Their steps were slow and even, like they were on a shift in the middle of the day, not at 2 a.m. in an abandoned asylum. I couldn't see their eyes, just the pale skin above the masks, but they were looking straight at us, no hesitation, like they had been expecting us to be there. We froze. They didn't say anything, didn't stop, didn't even look surprised. They just kept walking down the tunnel toward us, and I could hear the squeak of their shoes on the concrete, that slow, calm squeak, like they had all the time in the world. "Back up," Tyler hissed, but we couldn't move for a second. They were maybe 50 feet away when we finally turned and ran. We ran down that tunnel, past the generator, through the warm, stale air, up the stairs and back into the cold of the first floor, and we didn't stop until we were outside. We didn't look back. We just jumped the fence, ripped my jeans on the top, and sprinted to the car. Ray was so shaken he dropped the keys trying to unlock the door, and we all just piled in, breathing hard, slamming the doors, locking them, and peeling out of there like we were being chased. No one said anything until we were 3 blocks away, parked under a dead streetlight, catching our breath. "Did you see their eyes?" Tyler asked finally, and none of us answered, because I don't think any of us really saw eyes. Just pale skin and those masks, and that calm walk toward us like they were on their way to check on a patient. We never went back to Hawthorne. I told myself maybe it was security, but there's no reason for security to be dressed like that, with masks and caps, walking those tunnels at 2 a.m. in a building that's supposed to be condemned. A few days later, I drove by in daylight just to see if it felt different, but the place looked dead, like it hadn't had power in years. I don't know how those tunnels were lit. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if we hadn't run, if we had stayed and let them walk up to us. I don't know what they wanted or what they were doing down there, and I don't think I want to know. I don't talk about it anymore because I can't explain it without sounding crazy. I don't need anyone to believe me. I just know I'm never going near that place again, and if you ever get the idea to mess around in a closed-up hospital, just don't. It's not worth it. That's all I have to say. Story 7. I was crashing on a friend's couch in Oakland at the time, working part-time doing food delivery while I figured out what I wanted to do. The guy I was staying with, Rob, was big into urban exploring, and one night he came home hyped about this abandoned flour mill near the port that he'd found during a run. He wanted me to come with him the next night to check it out. I didn't think much about it, just figured it would be something stupid to kill time, maybe get some cool pictures. We got there around 10, parked in an alley 2 streets over, and hopped a fence that was falling apart. I remember the first thing I noticed was the smell, like wet concrete and piss. The building looked like it had been bombed out, with big holes in the walls and rusted-out staircases. I was already a little on edge, but I didn't say anything. Rob handed me the flashlight, and we went in. Inside, it was colder than I expected. The walls were covered in graffiti, a lot of gang tags, but also weird stuff like eyeballs and upside-down crosses. We stepped over broken glass and old needles, trying not to make too much noise, but every step echoed. It felt like we were making way more noise than we were. At one point, Rob found a little room with some old mattresses, and I could tell people had been staying there. It was clear someone had shot up in there recently, but there was no one around that night, so we kept going. We were on the 2nd floor when the flashlight started to flicker, and I realized it was the only one we had. I remember joking, "If this thing dies, we're so screwed." Rob didn't laugh. We reached a narrow stairway that led up to a catwalk bridge connecting the section we were in to the main factory floor. I don't know why, but as soon as we got to the top, I felt sick to my stomach. There was this heavy feeling, like the air was thicker, and I started to hear this faint dripping sound that didn't stop. It was pitch black past where the flashlight could reach. To the right, there was this open doorway that looked like it led into a big room. It was completely dark inside, and it felt wrong. It was like looking into a hole in the world. I didn't want to look at it, but I couldn't stop. "Dude, check that out," Rob whispered, pointing the flashlight at something on the wall. It was a piece of cardboard nailed to the doorframe, spray painted in big red letters. 2. Hell with an arrow pointing into that room. Rob laughed nervously, like he was trying to brush it off, but his voice cracked. "Man, someone's got jokes." I didn't say anything. I was looking at the darkness past that sign, and it felt like it was looking back at me. I know how that sounds, but that's exactly how it felt. I started to feel like I couldn't breathe right. "Let's just keep going across the bridge," I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out shaky. We started moving, but Rob stopped, shining the light back toward the doorway. "Wait, did you hear that?" I froze. The dripping sound was louder now, but underneath it, I heard something else. It was like a shuffling, but it wasn't footsteps. It was like something heavy being dragged, slow, from deep inside that dark room. My eyes were locked on that black doorway, and I felt my hands go cold and numb. Rob whispered, "Is someone in there?" Then the flashlight flickered again, and for a split second, it shined directly into that room. I saw the floor, stained dark, and something tall in the back, like a figure, but it was wrong. It was too tall, its shoulders almost touching the top of the doorway, and it was leaning out, like it was trying to look at us. The light flickered out completely. Rob screamed. I've never heard him scream like that. I felt him grab my arm, pulling me back, and I turned, running so hard that I almost fell down the stairs. We didn't say a word, just ran through that building in the dark, crashing into walls and slipping on the debris, until we found a broken window on the ground floor and climbed out. We didn't stop running until we were a few blocks away. We collapsed on the sidewalk, gasping, and I realized I was crying, and Rob was too. We didn't look at each other. We just sat there shaking until we could breathe again. We never went back, and we didn't talk about it for a long time. I tried to convince myself that it was a shadow or a pile of junk and the flashlight playing tricks on us, but that feeling, like it was looking at me, has never gone away. It's like it followed me out of that place. Story 8. I don't tell people about this because it sounds like something you'd make up to scare kids. But it happened, and I still think about it every time I'm alone in the dark. I grew up in a small town in Michigan, one of those places with abandoned factories and empty lots where kids hang out because there's nothing else to do. I was 19, still living with my mom, working nights at a gas station, trying to save up for a car that wouldn't stall every 10 miles. On days off, I'd meet up with my friend Corey and his cousin Mike, and we'd find places to explore. There was this old plant on the edge of town, half caved in, rusted fences, busted out windows. No one really knew what it used to be. Some people said it was a meat processing place. Others said it was a chemical plant. We didn't care. It was a place to drink cheap beer and feel like we were doing something other than just waiting around. That day it was cloudy, humid, the air thick enough to feel heavy in your chest. Corey had a flashlight, but it barely worked. I didn't have one, and Mike's phone was dead. We went anyway because we were bored, and there's something about boredom that makes you ignore every reason you shouldn't do something. We went down to the basement, stepping over broken glass and wet, mushy insulation. It was pitch black once we got to the stairs, but the air changed, got colder, smelled like wet dirt and mold. You know that feeling when your ears feel like they're ringing from the silence? That's what it felt like down there. Corey was ahead with the flashlight, joking around, saying it smelled like dead bodies. Mike and I laughed, but we were both sticking closer to Corey than we wanted to admit. We were just walking around in the dark, crunching glass under our shoes, shining the weak light into rooms that were nothing but collapsed ceilings and graffiti. Then Corey stopped, and I nearly bumped into him. "What is that?" he said. At first, I didn't see what he meant. He aimed the flashlight at a door that was hanging half off its hinges. It was metal, heavy, looked like it had been forced open. Past it was a narrow hallway going deeper underground, and at the end of it was another door, this one fully shut. "I'm not going down there," I said, but Corey was already moving. "Don't be a bitch," he said, laughing. Mike didn't say anything, but he followed Corey, so I followed too, even though every part of me wanted to turn around. The hallway smelled stronger, like chemicals and rust. The floor was wet, and our shoes slipped a little as we walked. Corey knocked on the door at the end, like an idiot, and the sound echoed down the hall, hollow and metallic. Then he opened it. It was a big room, bigger than I thought it would be. The flashlight beam bounced around, catching on rusted metal tanks and pipes running across the ceiling. There was water on the floor, or maybe oil, I don't know, but it reflected the light in a slick, black way. Then Corey swung the light to the right, and that's when we saw it. There was a car in there, a burned-out car, just sitting in the middle of the room like it had been parked there. The windows were all blown out, the seats were gone, the inside was black and melted, but the frame was still there, like a skeleton. "How the hell did that get down here?" Mike said, his voice too loud in the room. We just stood there staring at it. The car didn't make sense. The hallway we came through was way too narrow, the stairs too tight. There was no way someone could have driven it down there, and there were no big doors or ramps. "Probably stolen," Corey said, but he didn't sound like he believed it. I wanted to leave. I was getting that feeling you get when you know you're being watched, even when you can't see anyone. I kept turning around, expecting to see someone standing in the hallway behind us. Corey was walking around the car, shining the flashlight inside. Mike and I stayed back. I remember I could hear the water dripping from the ceiling, and it was so quiet that every drip sounded like a gunshot. Then Corey leaned into the car to look at something, and the flashlight went out. It was instant. We were in complete darkness, the kind where you can't even see your hand in front of your face. Mike cursed, and I heard Corey banging the flashlight, trying to get it to turn back on. "Dude, hurry up," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Then there was this sound. At first I thought it was water moving, but it wasn't. It was breathing. Heavy, wet breathing, like someone with a chest infection. It was close, too close, and it wasn't any of us. "Corey?" Mike said, his voice shaking. "Shut up," Corey whispered. We all stood there, not moving, in the dark. The breathing got louder, moving around us, but I couldn't tell where it was coming from. It was like it was circling us. Then there was a metal scraping sound, like something dragging on the floor, and I felt the air move, like something had just walked past me. That's when I ran. I don't know if Mike and Corey were behind me. I didn't care. I ran down that hallway in the dark, smashing into the walls, cutting my arms on something, just running until I could see the faint light from the stairwell. I didn't stop. I scrambled up the stairs, scraping my knees, slipping on the wet steps, pulling myself up with my hands. I didn't stop running until I was outside, gasping, shaking, bent over in the dirt. My eyes were watering. My heart felt like it was going to explode. Mike came out a few seconds later, then Corey clutching the flashlight, which was working again, the beam shaking in his trembling hands. None of us said anything. We just stood there, breathing hard, looking at each other. Then we left. We never talked about it after that. We never went back. I don't know what was down there, and I don't want to know. Story 9. I grew up in southern Ohio, out by Jackson, where the roads twist through woods that always felt too dark at night. I used to work second shift at a warehouse, and when I got off, I'd drive the back roads to clear my head. I'm not into ghost hunting or any of that crap, but I've always been curious about old places, especially those left to rot. That's how I ended up at that hotel. It was an old resort people used to call the Ridgeway, about 20 minutes from town, set back off the highway down a cracked asphalt road choked with saplings and weeds. It had been empty since the late 90s after the last owners went bankrupt and the county stopped bothering to patrol the property. I'd heard it was full of graffiti and mold, not much left to take pictures of, but that was fine with me. I didn't go out there for Instagram. I went out there because it was something to do after work besides drinking myself stupid. I parked near the service entrance. The air smelled heavy, like rain on pavement mixed with old mildew. I pulled my hood up, cut my flashlight on, and climbed through a busted window, feet crunching glass. Inside, it was dead quiet, except for the dripping water somewhere far off, and the smell was worse, like wet carpet and something rotting. It was so dark it felt like I was wearing the darkness, not just standing in it. I made my way through the old banquet hall where the ceiling had caved in, leaving piles of insulation and plaster on the floor. Spray paint everywhere, broken chairs, stale air that clung to my clothes. At first I thought it was empty. Then I saw the pool. It was down a short hallway, behind two glass doors hanging off their hinges. The water in the deep end was black and still, the bottom lost under a skin of algae and trash. I thought I saw something floating. Probably a tarp, I told myself. I turned away. I wasn't there for that. I found the stairwell, planning to check out the top floor where the penthouse suites used to be. The stairs were gritty, littered with broken tiles and leaves. Every step echoed. I remember thinking that it felt like I was inside something that didn't want me there. I stopped on the fourth floor because it was the only door that wasn't stuck or swollen shut. It opened easy, like it was waiting for me. The air changed when I stepped through. It was warmer somehow, and it didn't smell like mold. It smelled like something else, something metallic and thick, like old blood. I remember feeling my stomach tighten, and I told myself it was just a dead animal somewhere. The hallway stretched out, lined with door after door, some open, some closed. The carpet was black with old water damage, and it squished under my boots. My flashlight flickered, and that was when I heard it, a dragging sound. It was soft at first, like something heavy sliding across the floor, maybe down the hall, maybe inside one of the rooms. I stopped, trying to pinpoint it, telling myself it was just a raccoon. I've seen them in abandoned places before, ripping open old vending machines. Then it stopped. I called out, "Yo, anyone here?" My voice sounded small, like it got swallowed by the hall. That was when I heard the door close behind me. Not slam, just a quiet click. But in that silence, it was loud enough to stop my heart for a second. I spun around, pointing my flashlight, but the hallway was empty. I tried the door back to the stairwell. It wouldn't open. I twisted the handle, pushed, pulled. It was like it was welded shut. That's when I smelled it stronger, like rust and dirt and something sweet rotting underneath. The dragging started again, closer this time, slow and wet, coming from one of the rooms to my right. I remember telling myself to leave, to find another stairwell, to get out, but my feet wouldn't move. I just stood there, flashlight shaking, pointing it at the open doorway. It was dark inside, but I saw something move, something pale and bloated, shifting just past the doorframe. It made a noise like a breath that caught in its throat, a gurgling wet sound. I don't know why, but I whispered, "Hello?" It came crawling out, slow, dragging itself with these arms that looked too long, the skin gray and splitting, like it had been underwater too long. Its hair hung in clumps, and its head lolled to the side like it was broken. It smelled like the pool downstairs. It looked up at me, and its mouth opened, but nothing came out. Just that wet rattle, like it was trying to say something, but couldn't. I backed away, but it kept coming, pulling itself across the carpet with wet thumps, leaving dark stains behind. My light caught its eyes, and they were black, bottomless, like pits in its face. I could see its tongue, swollen and purple, pushing against its teeth. It reached out, and I turned and ran. I don't remember making it to the end of the hallway, but I found another stairwell door, and this one opened. I slammed it behind me and took the stairs 2 at a time, boots slipping on the dusty steps. I could hear it behind me, thumping against the door, scratching like it was trying to get through. I didn't stop until I hit the lobby, the air cold and sharp, cutting through the stink on my clothes. I don't remember getting to my car. I just remember sitting behind the wheel, shaking, trying to breathe, watching the hotel in my rearview mirror, waiting to see it at the window. It never came. I didn't go back there. I don't even drive that way anymore, not even in daylight. Story 10. I didn't tell my mom where I was going that day because I knew she'd flip. I live in a small rental house near Beckley, West Virginia, and I work night shifts at a gas station. I've been trying to get out more during the day, clear my head, get some fresh air, that kind of thing. My girlfriend Liv was off work, so we just wanted to see something different. She found this spot online, one of those abandoned places people take pictures of. It was an unfinished construction site out past Harper Road, half-eaten by kudzu and rust. We were just gonna look around, maybe take a few dumb pictures. It didn't feel scary at first. It was quiet out there, but you could still hear the highway if you stood still. A few old concrete pillars stuck out of the tall grass, and there was a line of rusted bulldozers halfway sunk into the mud, all covered in vines like the woods were trying to eat them. Liv was poking around an old concrete slab, and I was walking over to what looked like a half-finished foundation with a rebar skeleton sticking up. The ground was soft, smelled like wet leaves and mold, and you could hear cicadas even though it was cloudy. Liv called out, "There's nothing here, babe." I remember checking my phone to see the time because it looked like rain, and I didn't want to get stuck in the mud. That's when she called me again, but her voice was different. "Hey, come here." I walked over, and she was standing dead still, staring at the tree line about 30 feet away. Her face was pale, and her jaw was kind of twitching, like she couldn't decide if she was about to say something or not. "What?" I asked, trying to keep my voice normal. "There's a guy," she said, not blinking, "in the woods watching us." At first, I thought she was messing with me. Liv does that sometimes, especially if she thinks I'm getting too confident in a creepy place. But she didn't move. She just pointed with her finger, barely lifting it. "There," she whispered. I looked, and for a second, I didn't see anything but dark leaves. Then I saw him, a man maybe, crouched halfway behind a tree, wearing something dark, just enough to catch the difference between his clothes and the green around him. He was staring straight at Liv, and the second he saw me look at him, he dropped down flat into the undergrowth, like he was trying to disappear. My whole body turned cold. I grabbed Liv's wrist and started pulling her back toward the car, which was parked down a dirt path we had walked in on. She didn't fight me. She didn't say anything. I think we both had the same thought at the same time. If he was hiding, it meant he wasn't just some random hunter or a hiker. We were about halfway to the car when I heard it, a fast, low rustling, like someone crawling fast through the brush behind us. I looked back once, and I swear to God, I saw him belly crawling, dragging himself under the ferns, moving toward us without standing up. Liv started to whimper, but she kept running. I could hear my own breathing, loud in my ears, and the slap of mud against my shoes as I pushed her in front of me, making sure she stayed ahead. When we got to the car, I ripped the keys out of my pocket with shaking hands. Liv was looking over my shoulder, saying over and over, "He's coming, he's coming, he's coming." I turned, and there he was, standing at the tree line now. We could see him clearly. His clothes were dark, muddy, hanging off him, but it was his face that made my knees nearly give out. His mouth was too wide, like it was stretched, and his eyes were dark holes. I couldn't see the whites of his eyes, just black, like empty sockets or something. He didn't move, just stood there, watching us, breathing heavy enough we could hear it across the distance. I got the car door open and shoved Liv inside. When I got in, I fumbled the key so bad it fell into the footwell, and I almost started crying trying to grab it. Liv was screaming, "Go, go, go!" When I looked up again, he was gone. That was worse than seeing him there. I got the car started, slammed it into reverse, and nearly took out the mailbox at the end of the dirt drive getting out of there. Liv was shaking so bad she couldn't get her seatbelt on, just kept looking out the back window, whispering, "Where is he?" I drove fast until we hit the highway, and I didn't say a word. I kept checking the rearview mirror to see if we were being followed, but there was nothing behind us except wet road and trees. When we got back to town, we parked at the gas station I work at. Liv wouldn't get out of the car at first, and when she finally did, she threw up in the trash can by pump 4. We sat inside and she just stared at her hands, mumbling that she could see his face every time she blinked. I don't know what we saw that day. Maybe it was just a guy, but something about the way he moved didn't look right, didn't feel human. And that face, either it was painted or it wasn't a face at all. I know I should have called the police, but I didn't. What would I say? That we saw a man with black eyes crawling in the woods at an abandoned site? They'd laugh us out of the station. I haven't been back out there since, and Liv doesn't even drive past that road anymore.